No. Hello, everyone. We're live again, doing our series on AI strategy and transformation. We've got Tyler Small back with us and excited to be talking about this. I think this has been our most exciting week, Tyler, as we prepared for this. This is one that we both lean into heavily, but I think a lot of people shy away from this idea of change management. Once you have your strategy going, how do we actually put it into work? So we're going to give some practical change management strategies today, both from my background and experience and Tyler's, and mix those together. And hopefully they're beneficial for everyone that's listening in how they can start looking at AI for profitability. And what I mean by that, and we can have a discussion on this, is what we find in majority of projects, whether it's an AI project or any kind of technology or digital transformation delivery, usually fail in this space. The adoption is low. The understanding, just creating AI for AI's sake, does not work, right? So we're going to dig into some of the strategies that you can start looking at in your own organizations, within your own frameworks, within your teams, of how can we leverage, but really understand what is the profitability and the goals of implementing AI. It's not always an AI solution. Even in the engagements that Tyler and I have been working on, it's interesting that they say, come in and help us with AI. Majority of the time, it's just process improvement or systems or data or integration strategies, things like that, that really enable future use of AI. And so this will be a really fun next step in this series that we're doing.
This will be fun. This will be a fun one. I'm excited.
Well, let's get into it then, shall we? Let's move on to the next area here. Oh, and I always have to pause. I always have to do this. With this series that we've been doing this last month with Tyler, he has offered to book a free AI consult. So we're throwing that QR code out for everyone. We'll present it again at the end. But just if you have any questions in this space, whether it is, how do I put an AI strategy together? How do I do transformation? How do I make sure that everybody's on the same page? How do I start upskilling? We do training, so AI training. Make sure you're hitting that QR code and getting time on his calendar so that you can start going through this journey along with us. So wanted to make sure we put that out there.
That's right. And just a reminder, there's a 10 to 20% productivity boost on the table. It's low-hanging fruit, and just getting some minimum basic training with super basic tools, you can boost productivity for the average knowledge worker by an easy 10 to 20%.
I think that's what's been so exciting about this work, Tyler, is there hasn't been a meeting I've had yet where we didn't find an improvement.
Yeah.
Not one. And it's such a fun process, right? To be able to identify those problems and help with quick wins like that. It makes this job really enjoyable, honestly, because you're like, okay, I can help almost every single meeting and not have to spend weeks or months figuring it out. It's like, oh, well, we could just do this. And they go, oh, great. Right. It's really, quite fulfilling.
It's like you go to the mechanic, and the mechanic can always find something that's wrong, but only it's like, a tenth or a hundredth of the cost that you'd expect, like, oh no, a new transmission, like, it's like, oh, there's this big improvement I can make, but it's very inexpensive relatively compared to, the other things you pay for. So it is a lot of fun. It's like, hey, we can do this, and it'll take 10 minutes to implement that.
Absolutely.
It's great.
All right.
So my down button. There we go.
Okay.
So we talked about this beforehand. This is just so exciting, the critical role of change management. And you'll see different metrics and different research reports, and up to 80% of projects fail because they didn't go through the change management. And Trina, we were talking about this beforehand, right? Of like that sometimes people say, oh, well, we've got this project, we know what everybody has to do, and so now we'll just kind of dump it on them.
Yeah. Just here you go. Okay, do AI, right? And I don't know what that means. I think
Yeah,
the other, you know, really, and this is why I use the symbolism of mountains throughout all of, with Rise Next.
I love it.
These journeys can seem daunting, right? Trying to climb these peaks, if you will, of making these transformations and going through this journey together. We're here to help you climb through this and navigate through. And we're seeing there's such fast-paced change happening. The change management role is becoming so critical. And it's not just the tech. I think a lot of times when I'm working with executives or others in organization, they assume that AI is about the tech, and
Mhm.
that is such a key piece. But it's leveraging it in a way that you can transform the work that your people are doing, and so it is a people initiative. And I
Yeah,
think that understanding both the technologies that are available that could solve the problems, identifying the problems, and then tying the right technologies is one piece. But then going through this journey together on, okay, how do I bring everybody along? How do I make sure everybody's on the same page? How do I make sure I'm getting adoption? Because just throwing a tool out there, whether it's an AI tool or any tool, you have to make sure people understand how to use it and leverage it the best. And that takes training. It takes investment in communications. It takes all of those things to be able to create the success. And AI isn't any different. You have to have both sides of the coin, if you will, in order to go through this journey
yeah,
completely and successfully.
yeah. And I look at these mountains. I love mountains. I love hiking and climbing, and we both enjoy being in the mountains a lot. And they do kind of look a little bit foreboding. And if you kind of look at them, you're like, oh, that looks a little scary, right? But there's so many things that a mountain guide will do for you to help you, get up a challenge like that. And in this webinar, you'll learn just some of these things, and probably you've learned about some of them before, but we'll go into them specifically from an AI perspective, and we'll give you a lot of support so that you feel very comfortable on this trip. There we go. So building these professional relationships is the first part. A friend of mine says this AI is about people, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
true no matter what kind of project that you have, but it's specifically far more important with AI because a lot of people, when they first hear about it or when they see it coming into their work environment, they say, "Oh my gosh, this is going to take my job. What's going
Fear.
on here?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of fear. There's a lot of paradigm shifts that have to take place in order for people to understand that, okay, what we're doing right now is going to help you. It's going to make you more productive. It's going to help you develop your strategic abilities. It's going to help you get to the things that are most important. It's going to increase your quality of life and highlighting all the positives. And if you need any help at all going through and figuring out how will this particular initiative help the individual end user,
Mm-hmm.
go into your favorite large language model and type in the project or upload the project document, and you can identify those bullet points of what is going to help make those connections happen, what is going to help you engage with your audience, and what is going to smooth out the adoption process.
Absolutely. And I think that the starting place for an organization needs to come from trust.
Mhm.
And if you have an organization that's built a foundation of trust, of understanding that my leadership has my best interest in mind, I think that's where AI is shaking things up. Is there is this fear out there of like they're just going to try and replace me, and
Mhm.
it could be like it. I'm not discounting that. That from a profitability standpoint, companies are looking at ways to be able to become more profitable, right? And
Mhm.
so there's two components here. One is understanding where your employees are at, because you don't want to start all of a sudden having a ton of attrition because you're introducing AI because they're scared.
Mhm.
Um, but working through, and it takes really strong trust as well as a very developed and intentional communication plan, and acknowledging that we're going through this journey together. We're going to look for areas where we can optimize your role. I had a really intriguing conversation with a group last week where I was going to speak at Weber State, and their group is doing project-based delivery with industry, which is awesome. And I was talking to the team that was delivering that. We were saying, if this frees up, if AI frees up our workforces, does that mean we just reduce staff? I don't think so. I think what it enables us to do is to scale our organization faster with the people you do have, and the more enabled they are, they can cross skill. You're going to have additional use cases of where they can then be leveraged in different roles. And if you free up that time with an individual, how much better is it for them to be able to start to build these professional relationships? Take that time to be able to foster connection, to connect more on a human level, on a team level with our clients better. That's going to drive market share if we can make that shift of, yes, we're going to get rid of the small tasks, hand those over, and allow them to spend more time in developing relationships, which is where real business happens, right? It's within the relationships with outside of our company or with our partners, with like, how do we be intentional in those shifts to be able to not just focus on the productivity, but the deeper experience and meaning behind and putting more focus there.
Right. And that's the elephant in the room, isn't it? Is, when someone's wondering, like, are you trying to decrease headcount, right? And if the answer is yes, then that's a conversation that needs to be had. And then what are the things that you're going to do for anyone whose job is basically automated out? And some of the opportunities, I think, are the reskilling. Some of the opportunities are, right, the opportunity to help someone become an ace in AI. So if they're participating in the automation of their role, then they could potentially be much more hot on the job market. Like if they're like, hey, like I can help you automate this role. Like if you have 20 of these, you hire me, like I can help you, so that you don't have to do as much backfilling.
Right.
Other times, like you said, is working with a large tech company, and they're working on, they need some help automating a process, and as we talked through, we realized we could free up 8 jobs. And I said, do you have a plan in place? Have you done some communications around helping people reskill and land softly and providing resources and severance and things like that? And he said, well, no, we're growing so fast. We actually would love to use these people in a different area.
Right.
So I think making those communications very clear, like if you're going to make headcount cutbacks, then making that very clear in what your plan is for those who are in that bucket.
Yeah.
Or if you're not, being very clear about that and being very forthright. Whenever we do, I've worked with a lot of companies on, just different HR projects where we're going to tighten down job descriptions. We're looking at putting people in different levels. We're tightening down the salary bands, and people want to know, like, their first question is my salary going to go down? Is there a chance that my salary will go down as a result of this project? And you want to be very, very clear in communicating, look, like if there is a big risk in their mind like that, and you're not going to, in that risk, is not going to happen, or it's not going to happen this year, then you need to say, like, hey, like, by the way, like, this is not in our strategic plan. We want to ensure that everyone knows that we intend this, this, and this, and being very clear about it can help clear up some of the fear, just initially addressing that elephant in the room.
What's interesting, Tyler, is that we were going to do this webinar on resource planning, right? And we're like, well, that's kind of a boring topic. Are people really going to want to get into how to use AI for resource planning? There are AI applications for resource planning. I used to run eBay's resource management office, and so I had 250 contractors, offshore developers, and then we had some employees, and we were having to do this shuffle all the time of, like, where are we going to be pulling our resources, right? How every strategic plan we had to revise the resource planning. So there's a very much niche role for AI in resource planning. But as you're speaking, this still comes back from change management, right? Because once you have your strategy and you're looking at the impacts it's going to have to your workforce, not only is it like a resource staffing, but an HR perspective as far as like communication and planning how we're going to lead through this change with our current workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's considerations here. Anytime you put a strategic plan, you start implementing some of these concepts, you have to be thinking through end to end, not just the technology, I think is the point here of the downstream impacts and understanding how that will impact your organization and utilizing AI as we move through this. And I think we're going to be talking more about this in your communications planning and bringing your organization along with you in a like we said at the beginning, that from a place of trust.
Yeah, exactly. Did I skip one? No,
Nope,
we're good.
I think we're good.
Okay. I think it's 3 down arrows and we're good. So the executive sponsors and change champions, this is something you need for every change project, right? For every time you're saying, hey, we want you people to stop doing A and start doing B, or we want you to do what you're doing a little differently, or we want you to stop, we want you to add this thing on or subtract, whatever it is, you want to have at least one executive sponsor who is an influencer in the organization, who has a voice, who has the opportunity to both listen to the organization and influence the organization. So somebody who you can put up in the town halls, with the message, somebody who is in the executive meetings and in other meetings in other departments where they can be listening for challenges and opportunities to communicate better about it, or to adapt the change that you're intending to make, or to adapt the communications about the change. The other is this category of change champions. So they don't have to be an executive, but they can be at all levels of the organization. And I like to have a ratio of change champions that's appropriate for the task. Sometimes it's 1 to 100. Sometimes it's more like 1 in 20. You want to have a change champion within different areas of the organization so that they can be fully informed about it. So you may just be giving them pretty much the same communications as everybody else, but maybe you give them the communications a little bit earlier, and you have some meetings where I did one project. We had a $12 million software implementation contract, and I was responsible for all the change management. So we had an executive sponsor, and then we had additional executive sponsors for major pieces of the project. And then we had a group of 90 change champions that we recruited. And I led this group through the process, and we'd have monthly meetings. We had a Teams channel so that we could all communicate, and they would ask questions. And it was great because they would ask the questions. They would get questions in their meetings that they were presenting to. They would visit other groups and, and reveal here's what's coming up, and repeat what's coming up. And then people would say, hey, what about this? They would say, oh, I'll find out. And so I would then go meet with, executives and develop policy, and then come back and to that group say, okay, here's what I found out. And it was really nice to have all those arms, legs, ears, and eyes throughout the organization so that we could move faster and smoother through the whole thing. And so what you don't want is, in the open mic session where the CEO or the president is answering questions, somebody's saying like, hey, like, what about this? And then, and then them saying like the wrong thing, or saying like, I don't know. And really, we should have known that beforehand. So sometimes the best answer is, I don't know. But by preparing those things beforehand, running those meetings, like that was a really good opportunity to get the right information through the organization and dispel the fears and help people become very comfortable with what's coming up next.
Yeah, and I've used this numerous times, right? We were running, 300 to 500 projects a year within the PMO that I was overseeing, and all of our project management teams. We had a staff about 40 40 or so project managers, technical project managers delivering.
Yeah.
And each one of them, there's no way you can scale to deliver and drive adoption without a change management network.
Mm-hmm.
And so we leveraged that. We would identify individuals that could be the vocal advocates, get on board, make sure that they're, because once you build trust with them, they can disseminate the trust and explain why this is valuable to their team. So we would set it up so that change agents would be identified. And it was kind of like a team lead type role. Like they would be the one that would be the voice for the team. And they could be the ones that understood the day-to-day tasks that might be disrupted and talk them through that and kind of calm those fears. I mean, not everybody's running an organization of that size, but even within a smaller group, right? Within, 100 to 200 employees all the way up. This is a great way of having somebody dedicated, carving out. So not everybody's disrupted going through the change. You can have one person that can work through and hash through the change impacts for their team, and then be able to have them help train. Like we would have them do training. It just depends on your organizational size. But this idea of getting people on board that are trusted, that then can help build trust, right? It's a network.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's something that a lot of people like to do. Like, oh, raise your hand if you want to be more informed about what's coming. And there's specific people in your organization who really, they want that, right? They lean in. And another thing about it is that, if you're thinking, oh, well, I'd like to set this up, but I'm not sure what this looks like. I'm not sure how to, how this is structured. Ask your favorite LLM, ask ChatGPT, ask Claude, like, what does the commitment look like for a change champion? It's like 1 hour a month or 2 hours a month. And, it's very small, but it can help you paint this picture. And if people haven't heard this before, sometimes they're like, what is that? I have no idea what this means. You say the word change management and most people are like, I have no idea what that is, right? So being able to communicate what it looks like, the structure of it, like your favorite LLM will help you out with that.
Yeah, I love it. And we actually have a comment in from Elizabeth. She's saying, I love the change champion role. I was just discussing this with the team yesterday, so this is super timely. Thank you. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And what's interesting in this, having done enterprise software delivery now for 30 years, the idea of a subject matter expert, right? Bringing in the ones, they become the subject matter expert. And we have such an opportunity right now in the AI space to create these, because nobody's done this before. Like no one, right? Like we are at the very beginning stage. If they have experience in this space, it's maybe a year, right? I mean, we were doing forms of AI over the last 20 years, but nothing like we're doing now, and not at the speed that we're going. And we need to get individuals on board and leaning in and saying, we want you to become the subject matter expert on AI in your space. Like, how empowering is that for an employee that's like, yes, please, I want to lean in. I want to become, upskilled and validated in this journey that we're all taking. This is a huge opportunity for organizations right now to engage and bring in and distill these fears and say, we're going to empower you to go figure this out along with us.
Yeah. People are always reaching out to Trina and I and asking, hey, this AI thing, I know it's big. I know it's a thing. How do I get into this? How do I get started? And it's a really big opportunity. One more. There we go. So crafting this purpose statement is really big. So you've kind of what the project is, and now you have this change management side, which is the people side of project management, and you have this purpose statement, and the purpose statement is basically the thing that you go back to in all of your communications. So when you're first talking to your executive sponsor, and you're just starting to reach out to your network and develop these change champion connections, that network, then you're doing a lot of gathering of information. Hey, what are people what are people concerned about? What are the fears? What are the hopes? What are the dreams? And you're aligning your messaging with the group. And so that purpose statement uses very specific words and phrases from your research. Maybe you've done a pre-survey, or you had interviews, or you've had just informal conversations, and you want to get that purpose statement so that it's like maybe one sentence long, and it says exactly what this is about, who it's for, when it's going to happen, why, especially the why, and
Why?
and the why behind the why, right? And so that you have that, and then you always go back to it, and you know that this thing is, you something you test and you measure against, and you say, hey, we're thinking about this purpose statement. Go to, and what do you think of this? Is there anything that we can do to improve this? Does this sit well with your people? And it allows you to have this anchor point for everything else you do. Through that process, you're also able to anticipate the risks, right? And so you're doing a little bit of that risk mitigation by building it into your purpose statement, and then you're aligning to the organizational goals of your firm, of your company, of your organization, and you're saying, how does this project align with our goals? Which ones of our goals, is it obviously serving? And there might be some functional things that are like, oh, well, everybody knows we're doing this, we're going to say that. And then maybe it also helps with another thing that's like slightly less functional, but it really does actually help with something that everybody wants. I find that cultural values are something that, most people, they're like, oh, like, this is supposed to be fair. Our culture is supposed to be fair. I like that. I want more of that. That sounds good to me. And so if you say, oh, like, this is like part of the reasons we're doing this project is to make our organization more fair, and they're like, oh, AI makes our organization more fair.
And then
Good.
how is that? Yeah, explain that. And I know when we first started this series, 4 weeks ago now, the opportunity for AI in helping with this process is huge, because you can bring in your employee sentiment data, you can bring in your vision, mission, and values, you can bring in all of these to create your purpose statement behind AI, use AI to do it. And I think these are the mindset shifts we're trying to help even ourselves. We've had this fun conversation about our own experiences, and like, oh, why didn't I just use AI to do this? Like, it's starting to learn to ask the question of, how could I use AI to do this? What data would I need to bring in to go through this? How do I leverage AI to do my risk assessments? How do I leverage it to identify the right mitigation strategies? So it's not just it's kind of like this, I'm using AI to determine my AI strategy. I'm using AI to build my comm strategy. I'm using AI to be able to identify the opportunities and make it, it's a partner now in everything.
Yeah.
And crafting that and getting into that. And then what's interesting is that the speed that AI is introducing, that's required now to be able to move to the speed, requires AI, right? So it's just kind of this funny, I have to use AI to be able to implement AI type approach, and getting into that way of thinking as you move forward. So, but the core here, the fundamentals for project delivery, for enterprise deployments, the fundamentals are the same.
It's true.
Right? Nothing has changed as far as core enterprise delivery. It's just the speed of change and the support and ability to move through it in a faster and more aware process.
Yeah, it's just funny how the speed of change is so much faster, and yet the size of the changes are sometimes much larger and
Mhm.
more difficult to grok, cognitively to wrap your head around. So it's a big challenge. I think it calls even more for change management compared to a lot of other.
Absolutely. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the critical thing. It's as I as I've been leaning into research this last year, and studying and getting in, the number one thing that comes up from every deployment on AI, it always comes down to change management practices that are the point of failure.
Hmm.
And so I think that's why we felt this urgency to be able to get this out here and have this conversation with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So change management proposal. So we've done the purpose statement. We've looked at the risks and how to mitigate them. Now it's time to do the actual proposal and to engage the executive sponsor. So when we talk about engaging the executive sponsor, that's like, okay, we've got the proposal together. We've been talking about this project. We've been listening and gathering information and figuring out how we're going to do the communication plan, the change management plan. And now I've gathered all that together. I've synthesized it into a proposal here, or maybe I took my interview transcription or my notes, and then I had AI create the proposal and I tweaked it a little bit. And then and then you're going with your executive sponsor and saying, hey, look, what do you see here? What risks do you see? What looks unclear? What looks wrong? What looks uncomfortable? What looks inaccurate? And how can we shave that down? How can we adapt it so that we can make it fit the organization, the culture, the objectives, and make it easier for you to communicate about? Because if your executive sponsor can't kind of quickly wrap their head around it and communicate the talking points, then it's too complicated.
Right. Yeah. And I think that this is another single point of failure for any project if you do not have an executive sponsor. Right. So, I mean, first step is to make sure you have someone that's identified to lead out and remove barriers and be there to help lead through this change, can message it, communicate it, hold people accountable. But then also leveraging, I look back on this at all of the series. If you go back and listen to the prior series that we have out here, how do I use AI to set my objectives and timelines and these resources? Bringing AI along the journey going forward in your planning and proposal components, and then using it to be able to help craft the messaging for this engagement method. You've got two different use cases here of how you can leverage AI in this process going forward to do your AI projects. Like I said, it's using AI to do AI. So think about when you're posing and pulling together your proposal components, using it there, then crafting your communication plans and messaging so that it resonates for the individual that you're going to be speaking to.
Yeah, and one way that you can do this, we've mentioned this before in a previous webinar, but I just wanted to call it out again because I read this article recently. It was published about 10, 11 days ago. And about a year ago, there was a study on these 1,000, this seems like it was MIT, but I could be wrong, but they got 1,000 AI agents and they kind of set them loose in this like computer game environment. And this 1,000 AI agents, they kind of built their own culture and they started throwing parties and inviting people to the parties, and those people would invite people, and they developed religions and politics. It was very interesting. That was a year ago, and then the same group of researchers recently did the same thing again. What they did is they had AI go out and interview 1,000 people, and the AI interviewed and asked them a bunch of questions following different personality profile, the big five and some others, and ask them just follow-up questions and learn a ton about their personalities. And so if you can get like, let's say that your executive sponsor has already done a personality assessment or two. If you can get those and then take your transcription notes, because if you've got either from your meeting inherently, or you have something like Fathom or Scribe that shows up in your meeting in your little note taker app and takes your notes there, you can take those transcriptions and put them in, and you can build this avatar of your executive sponsor in order to create scripts and talking points that the type that they would choose to say. So that's one way, using this personality profile information to help. And in the research, they found that that as they asked the AI questions and they asked the human questions, the AI representing each human on a 1-for-1, that there was an 85% correlation. And so there's this way to kind of predict and get it most of the way there, where it's like, how would this person talk about this subject? Well, we can now build that. You just pop that into a custom GPT, and then you can have a good guess at how they would describe a certain thing, or how they would resolve a certain concern, or how they would present a certain topic.
Right. It's fascinating. And one where I'm like, I keep wanting to create my own and see what I would say about the have my own like personal advisor, I guess, for myself. It's like your inner self talking to yourself. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's fun to conceptualize, but it's real, and you can do this now, right? Yeah. Some of these things we would say like in the future, if you could, like, all this stuff is available now. And I think that's the biggest thing here, is recognizing the power that's already right there in your hands, to be used, and not just within your companies, but with your clients. A lot of software systems are coming out now, where for sales teams, and this could be like one of your initiatives or strategies. Are you utilizing some of these capabilities to track emotional intelligence of your sales teams and how they're building relationships and how well they're doing, and do coaching? Customer experience is another big one, right? That's coming out in this area.
Yeah, it's really fun. The last thing I'll mention on this slide is the success metrics. Like, we're building out this whole plan, and then when as you go through it, you want to point out either visually on some kind of progress bar or milestone checkpoints. You want to be able to point out whether you're talking about in your making a presentation in the town hall, or you're putting it the different communications channels on your intranet, or you're sending a little bit through email or through Slack. Like, you want to have some kind of indication, visual if possible, of your progress through the milestones as you're accomplishing what you set out to do.
And there's two ways that I've done this. First thing I would say is make sure that every project and initiative you're doing has one specific primary owner, not a group. Mm-hmm. That's probably one of the biggest points of failure I've seen, is when they say, oh, this group owns this project, then nobody owns it, right? So make sure you have one specific, this isn't your sponsor, this is who owns the project success and is the primary accountability owner. Then you can have your other RASKey items, right, of who's a supporter, contributor, informed.
Yeah.
But what I used to do, and it's very simple, it goes back to having a really strong communication strategy. And what we would do is operationalize. Every project would have its own communication plan that would be identified, not just here's our project success metrics, targets, goals, but how are we going to communicate this? What operational meetings are we going to have on a regular basis to bring up and discuss as a team? What are those operational meetings? And then I would just have one slide that I would just update. And I had this little star that I would have like our high level milestones, right? Just one slide. We are here, right? Just to keep people on the journey along with me, as far as, are we moving forward to our set milestones? And if there's a risk come up, I do a little red flag. It's like the simplest little thing, but it helped everybody understand where we were at in completing this overall journey together. And you just move the star along the little path as you go, and drive some accountability. And like, oh, we just got stalled here. My star's now red. It's like kind of kindergarten, elementary, but
you need something.
You need some way of communicating and bringing everybody along the journey, right? It doesn't take a big, deep, in-depth report. It's just, here's where we're at, here's why, here's what we're doing about it, here's where we're going next. That's it.
So Trina, what happens when you have major stakeholders along the way that say, well, wait a minute, like, I think this is a little overkill. Do we really need to do all of these communications? This seems like a lot of time for my people. What would you say to that?
We have AI now. Like, it's not that hard. Like it used to be really hard. Yeah, it doesn't take as much time anymore. So, there's your answer.
Right?
Great setup question, Tyler. I wasn't expecting that, but we do have AI now, that makes this so much simpler to say, here's who I'm communicating to, here's my status updates for the week, and send it over.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take the time it used to do these comms plans,
Mm-hmm.
but they are still such a critical part
Yeah.
of success.
And we can also go back to our purpose statement, and we can go back to the risks that we're addressing in that purpose statement. And we can ask, like I think it would be bad if we did this thing and we didn't accomplish the purpose statement. So if we look at this, some of the risks that we took into account were X, Y, and Z, and nobody wants that, And so the reason that we're really hammering this down is because we want these positive things to happen.
Yeah, it's the vision, right? You need to set that purpose, the vision behind it, understand your why, and if you do that at the beginning, and are very clear on it, it makes this process so much easier, because it's easy to go back to your why, go back to the vision, where this is going to end up, where this is going to take us. When you get into like those huge, hairy problems that are going to take some effort to sort through, because they come up, right? You're going to dig in and go, okay, this is important to do. How do we put the team together to be able to work through this and just get through it, right? Because so going back to the why is definitely a critical component too.
And you use AI to go back to the why. It rhymes.
Yeah, you're gonna have to coin that, Tyler.
All right. Here we go. So whenever I'm doing a big change management strategy, I'm always saying, look, we're going to take these first few communications and we're going to test. And so that you do little pilots, you run them past people. I used to ride the elevator. I worked in one place where we had this big campus, and I'd ride the elevator up and down, 8 floors, and so that I wasn't having to interrupt people from their work. I wasn't having to call a bunch of meetings just to ask, these basic short questions. And I would say, look, we've got these 2 concepts. We're going to do this thing. Which one sounds better to you? And I would take, tallies, and I would have these A/B tests that I would run, and I was able to, by doing that, I'd ride the elevator up and down for maybe 30 minutes, and then the next day I'd have some more tests to do, and I was able to have a very high certainty that the population that I was serving would be very comfortable and prefer the things that I was serving up, because they would sometimes say, well, that neither of those make sense. What is it about? Like, they would say, they would have the real responses that, you'll never know that people are having if you just send an email out to everybody. Yeah. Right. So doing that testing is very, very helpful for ironing things out before you send it.
So one of the things that I'm really excited about right now, so this is one that we're starting to implement now. Just started to pick up and implement this solution just this last week, for an AI strategy, which is, today we are on Zoom. We record most of our calls. Most of our meetings are recorded at this point, right? And within that framework, everybody's kind of used the transcribe. Mm-hmm. What's interesting in the platform I'm now using and reselling with Rise Next, what it also captures is sentiment data. Mm-hmm. It captures how teams are feeling. It captures those conversations. And I don't have to go and ask each individual. I don't have to do a survey anymore. It's going to aggregate that data, and I can get a sentiment of how my projects are going. So I can this is just massively huge, right? For being able to handle this feedback piece, this feedback loop from a change management. So we're able to now implement these solutions so that as it's coming back in, we can quickly, as a leadership team or within our HR departments, even like wherever we're focusing this project and we want to get feedback, we can understand what are the challenges and things and sentiment that's coming back from the project teams that are now delivering.
Yeah. And what's
I
really
don't have to go gather anything. It's just being gathered.
right. And when you've sent me this type of reports from this tool at Scribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You send me this report and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I was paying attention to some of the people some of the time, but it's really hard in a call to pay attention to all the people all the time. And you
Mm-hmm.
have a bunch of stakeholders in the call, and you can get their sentiment feedback. Like you're often like very concerned about, okay, what's the next slide coming next, or how am I presenting, or how's this person or that person. But being able to have that sentiment data from all the comments that are given, how people are feeling, and be able to read over it. Okay, it looks like this person wasn't with us in the beginning, but they were with us by the end. Or
Yeah.
when we talked about this part, they were not on board with this, so we might have to go back and figure that out with for that group. And it's just, oh, it's so wonderful to have this data.
Yeah. And we can customize and tailor to whatever we're delivering. It's extremely powerful. And so if anybody's interested in learning more on that, please reach out, because this is one where we're starting to see a lot of benefits from a leadership development perspective, as well as from a project execution side, right? It's there's multiple ways to be able to create value in understanding currently what is the current sentiment and emotion and feeling within the delivery. Are we getting, I don't know if anybody else has been in those meetings. I know I have wish I would have had this in some of my clients when I worked at Oracle. I had some really large scale enterprise clients, and they would get really, really toxic. And there was even some where legal would have to get involved. But being able to track that and be able to say, was this a negative call or a positive? Like, what was going on? And okay, are we seeing more negative than positive within? And how do we address that? And being able to have that data could have made that a lot easier for us to be able to move through certain engagements together. And so it's just the opportunities aren't just from, I know, Gen AI and some of these LLMs, there's a huge opportunity, but there's a lot of new capabilities and exciting applications outside of that that are also enable for these massive change management projects that we're taking on to be successful.
Yeah, and I've heard this quote from several different places, but whatever is tracked and measured will improve. Isn't that the case? And so you have more, you have some additional data, and if you have too much, of course, it can just become a sea, an ocean of confusion. But if you have things and you take them in, and you figure out how can I operationally ingest this and build it into my system, then you can use that in order to improve the outcomes of your projects. It's really fun.
It is. It's exciting times.
All right.
All right. So we're going to do our last call to action before we wrap up here today. But I mean, I think Tyler, you and I could talk on this subject like never ending. It's
Definitely. Yeah.
But we do want to be appreciative of everybody's time here and be able to know that we're here to talk more. We would love to talk to you. So please use that QR code that we have listed here to get time with us. There's a lot of really new capabilities coming onto the scene. We're staying in touch with those. We're finding the ones that are the right things to be able to really help organizations move through their AI strategies and workforce transformations. So please reach out to us. We want to help anyone from wherever they're at in their journey and be able to move through this exciting and fun and overwhelming time that we're all moving through, right?
That's
so
right.
With that, I'll kind of wrap it up today. Tyler, thank you so much for all your knowledge and expertise that you're bringing into this space. It's great to work with you, and we'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.